Late yesterday, I walked over to the Supreme Court and joined those who were passing in tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It was an interesting moment as we were down at the bottom of the steps looking up at the casket that held her remains, and to think that this diminutive woman had such a giant-sized impact on the history of America. And it all started with a rejection. They rejected her at the major law firms of New York, wouldn't give her a chance to prove her own talent and skill. And she was forced to take clerkships and law professorships and other approaches to the law. That rejection may have been bad news for her at the moment. It was great news for the history of America, because she took her personal experience and turned it into a life mission. There was a moment in time in the history of our country where the word feminism was tossed around in negative context. But thanks to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her patience, her determination, and her courage, the cause of women became a mainstream cause, as it should be, across America. What an irony that we would lose her just weeks after losing John Lewis, the giant in the civil rights movement of the 1960s and beyond. Within hours of news of Justice Ginsburg's deaths, Senator McConnell announced he would hold a vote this year to replace her on the Supreme Court. He'd already sent out a signal that this was the way he was going to move, that all of the pious declarations about fairness and the will of the American people that we heard after the vacancy of Anton Scalia would be so quickly dismissed and reversed by Senator McConnell was no surprise for those of us who've watched him. It's clear that Republicans want to have a new justice, and they want to make certain that it's handpicked by President Trump. They're not sure of the outcome of this election, and so they want to get it done before the election. They want to get it done before November 3rd. But in politics, as a fellow taught me years ago, there's always a good reason and a real reason. The good reason supposedly is let's get this done quickly, but the real reason is because of something we can't ignore. If the decision to fill the Supreme Court vacancy is made by November 3rd, the new Supreme Court justice will be able to participate in the oral argument, in the hearing, first hearing, on California versus Texas, the case that will decide the future of the Affordable Care Act. And because that new justice will be at the hearing, that new justice will be able to vote come this next spring on the fate of that legislation. So for my friend from Texas to argue this has nothing to do with the ACA, the facts belie that argument. This has everything to do with the future of the Affordable Care Act. And I can quote no better source than the president himself, who said he wouldn't appoint a Supreme Court justice who wasn't joining with him to abolish the Affordable Care Act. There's no precedent for confirming a Supreme Court justice this close to a presidential election. Check the record. It has never, ever happened in the history of the United States later than July in any presidential year, ever. And of course, this election year is a reversal from the position that Republicans on this committee took just 4 years ago. I saw the pain in your faces as each one of you marched to the microphone and announced you were reversing the very position that you took 4 years ago when it came to Merrick Garland. In fact, on February 23rd, 2016, 4 years ago, every Republican member of this committee signed a letter, put it in writing, that a Supreme Court vacancy created by Justice Scalia's death in that election year should not be filled until after the American people spoke in election. That letter was sent 259 days before Election Day. The letter noted the election is well underway 259 days in advance 4 years ago, and said the decision was, quote, born of a necessity to protect the will of the American people. Now Republicans on this committee are saying exactly the opposite. There is pain in your face as you stand before the microphone and hear your words read back to you that you said just 4 years ago. Now there's going to be a hearing, I understand, on the week of October 12th, 2 weeks away from President Trump's expected announcement of a nominee this Saturday. Some of you are so confident that this nominee can be approved that your chairman has announced you've all committed already that you're going to vote for that nominee. That's what was said publicly. That's even before you know the name. Chief Justice Roberts, in his nomination, his hearing began 54 days after the nomination announcement. Justice Alito, 71 days. Sotomayor and Kagan, 49 days. Gorsuch, 48 days. Kavanaugh, 57 days. In this case, 2 weeks. That's all you need. All you need to check the background for a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. All we need to go through the FBI background check. Answer every question that's going to be done. Let's get it over with. So we know why the rush is on. It is because of the case of California versus Texas and the need to have someone on the bench to decide as the president wishes to take away the health insurance protection of 20 million Americans, including 600,000 in my home state of Illinois. Tens of millions of Americans with pre-existing condition, including 5 million in my state, would lose protections the Affordable Care Act gives them. My friend, the senator from Texas, says, oh, we're for pre-existing conditions. Really? Where is that Republican substitute bill that John McCain was looking for when he voted no and defied his own caucus and said that the Affordable Care Act should continue until the Republicans actually produce a substitute? In a hearing last week, we had the major public health officials of the Trump administration before us. I said, have any of you been engaged in writing a substitute for the Affordable Care Act? No. And the simple answer is, despite the lies of the president, it's not there. It doesn't exist. You can't write it. And instead, you want to destroy the Affordable Care Act. What a bitter irony that at this moment, in the middle of a raging pandemic, Senator McConnell can't even be bothered to come to the negotiating table to work on a COVID-19 relief package, but seems he'll spare no efforts to rush through a nominee to sit on the Supreme Court when Republicans try to wipe out the critical health care protections of the Affordable Care Act. If you watch the news, hardly a day goes by that there isn't some footage from Minsk in Belarus. What's going on there, of course, is a contesting of a presidential election, and the people have taken to the streets to try to displace their longtime dictator, the last European dictator, Lukashenko. They question whether or not there was a valid election, and there's good question to be asked. Turns out the only monitors of that election were the Russians, and we certainly do welcome them to monitor every election on earth. To hear the President of the United States last night repeat what he said before sent a chill down my spine, and I've been around politics a long time. To think that this president would question the outcome of an election if it were to go against him. He said it before, so it's no surprise. If I lose, it's because it's a fraudulent election. It's the only way it could happen. Those paper ballots, which can't be trusted, from a president who mailed in his paper ballot to vote in this election. Why is it that it has to be done before November 3rd? The president made it clear last night. I'm not making this up. The president said that he wants a new justice in place because he wants to make sure that he has 9 justices on the court if there is an election contest. It's one thing for the chairman of the committee to say, I'll live by the outcome of the Supreme Court. But if the outcome of the Supreme Court depends on one vote, and we're rushing to fill it with a loyalist, that pledge is at least questionable, if not suspect. The president went on to repeat his baseless claims about fraud in this election. But what troubles me is the thought that if we cannot have a peaceful transition of power in this democracy, how can this democracy survive? It really goes to the fundamentals. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to close by saying that I know how this is likely to end. Unless 2 more Republican senators have a conscience moment and come forward and say we just can't be party to this, we know how it will end. I know how it started. It started when a group of Republicans led by Senator McConnell decided to start using the filibuster in ways that were unimaginable, filing numbers of filibusters and motions of cloture in numbers we had never seen before in the history of the Senate. That's when it all started crumbling. And if you look around the Senate today, or even this committee, you have to ask yourself, what is left of the United States Senate? I'm the ranking member on the Immigration Subcommittee. Do we have any immigration issues in America? I've noticed we seem to have quite a few. Do you know how many hearings we've had in the Immigration Subcommittee in the last year, almost 2 years? 2? That's it? 2? And when it comes to this committee, producing substantive legislation, we're not in the business of doing that. But we are in the business of considering nominees. And the nominees today that we passed over include several that I think we ought to take into consideration. There are 5 judicial nominees on the agenda today. The oldest is 41 years old. The youngest, 33. Ms. Catherine Mizell has been rated not qualified by the American Bar Association. The Trump administration has now broken the record. No administration has ever nominated more people found unanimously unqualified by the American Bar Association. 10. I ask the same question which I continue to ask every time we face something like this. Are there not enough conservative Republican attorneys in America that you could find someone with qualifications for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench? Do you have to dig so deep for people who just finished their bar review courses to be given a lifetime appointment to the federal bench? One of the nominees, Thompson Dietz for the Court of Federal Claims, told the committee he's not personally litigated a single matter in his entire career and is not even admitted to practice before the court that he's seeking to be a judge on. Mr. Chairman, there's got to be better people and more talent out there for you to choose from than to send us these thinly qualified and unqualified nominees to fill lifetime appointments. I yield.